Thank you. It feels good to be home. It feels good to be in this space. I can't tell you how relaxing and affirming just being here this morning with you all, listening to Misa and Jennifer sing, and the prayers and the prayer chaplains and the hugs. And I've needed all of it today. And I've taken it with me on my journey. And I have felt it thousands of miles away. And sometimes, like the song says, when you don't know if it's doing any good, it's the practice that makes you know it is. That lets you stand in the midst of the pain and the fear and the suffering and the joy and be whole. Be wholehearted. To bring your entire presence to those moments and watch as those moments unfold, knowing that God is at work. Yeah, the talk today is the Gifts of Imperfection, and those of you who have been following me on Unity Online Radio know that I started out with this idea of this series. This idea of what we were going to talk about is how science and spirituality meet in the middle. And second week into the series, I wrote the host of the show and gave her a synopsis of what has just transpired in my life from one day to the next. And she wrote back, "Wow, I don't know what to say. Congratulations," or "I'm sorry." And that summed it up so incredibly well, because both were true, and both are continuing to be true today. What the series has been talking about is how science, both social science and psychology and physical science, interact with our faith practice. And what I've got to do for the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks in this journey is put that to the test and to share it in real time with all of you. The work we're talking about right now is the work of Brené Brown. Those of you may know her from her books or her work with Oprah and other people, but she talks about the gifts of imperfection, that when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, how things shift. And in the book, she writes, "Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light." Right? Only when we're brave enough to be excruciatingly vulnerable can we really be whole. Because we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're not human beings who decide to go to prayer and, okay, I'm going to connect to my spiritual nature. I believe, we teach, we hold that we are spiritual beings. First and foremost, that we existed before this incarnation and we will exist after this physical body in a never-ending infinite line. But that we're here in this body, in this definition, allows us to have another layer of experience that is equally rich, incredibly tender, and profoundly intimate. If we say yes to it, if we say, I am willing to experience this and I am willing to feel it. 3 weeks ago, after I was with you for the prayer chaplains, I got a call on a Wednesday afternoon here in the office, and by 11 o'clock that night I was on a red-eye flight. The next day I was in the hospital room where the NICU team had come before and told us what was about to happen, which we weren't aware of, the challenges in our son's life. But the next day he was born on Thursday afternoon, the 23rd, So JD and I and Roma and Tobias, our oldest son, and Roma all arrived at 5:30 in the morning in Tennessee and went straight to the hospital and went to the delivery room. Tobias and Roma weren't in the delivery room, to be clear. Yeah. But JD and I were, and it was beautiful, and it was frightening, and it was terrifying because we were having to absorb what was about to come and what the doctors were telling us we were going to face when we came out. And in the moment of birth, I watched and witnessed as Joshua was born and immediately rushed to the NICU table, which was also in the room, and a team of 20 medical professionals, doctors, and all were working on him. And all mine was to do was to hold space. It was very different than the birth I witnessed with Roma, where I got to hold her immediately. And this was about saving Joshua's life. And all I could do with tears streaming down my face and a smile because of the joy of this life was to stand there and know that God was in the midst of it all. And that the only thing and the most important thing I could do was to share that awareness and love with the whole room. And miracles happened. And he was taken care of and stabilized and whisked from the delivery room to the NICU unit at the hospital. And because of an infection that he got and because of some physical difficulties in his breathing structure in his mouth, this is Joshua on day 1. And he's 5 pounds, 3 ounces at this point, and he's on a ventilator and on an IV and monitors and fighting. And beautiful and whole and complete. So I would stand over him and touch him. We weren't able to hold him yet, and that was the hardest part for me as a parent, not being able to hold my child for over a week. But I could sing to him, I could talk to him, and I would say, "You are God's perfect child. We love you exactly the way you are." That there was no imperfection. What some people might call a disability or an abnormality or a birth defect or an illness, I got to reframe as wholeness, as completeness, as beauty, as love. That was my little boy. And on that Saturday, his birth mother signed all the papers, and JD and I became his guardians, his power of attorney, and his parents officially. And it was and is beautiful. Then for the next 2 weeks, I watched as he continued to improve and got off the ventilator and made great strides, and they dealt with the infection he had picked up and were able to treat him, and it shifted from, he had an E. coli infection from the intubation, and once they were able to identify it and treat it, he got substantially better. And we give thanks for miracles and the prayer, and the medical team and the medicine are as much of the hands and the voice and the instrument of God as our prayers and our touch are. Hallelujah for them. I am so grateful for the doctors and the staff and the amazing technology that saved my son's life. And then came last Monday, barely a week ago. Actually, I'll back up. The Thursday before. The Thursday before that, so a Thursday a week ago, this was Joshua. He had come off the ventilator, and he was wide-eyed and looking at me. And it's a feeding tube, because of his mouth, he can't suckle a bottle, so he has to be fed through a feeding tube. And the thing you see in his nose is called a nasal trumpet, and it's to keep his airway open so he can breathe. He hates it. And at any opportunity, he will rip it out, which is a good sign. And this is a day where I just got to be in face-to-face, eye-to-eye contact with him and loving every minute of it. But in this period, he continued to lose weight. And even though we were feeding him and trying to find the right adjustment of his foods, he went from 5 pounds 3 ounces to 4 pounds 1 ounce. Yeah. And I started to panic. I started to worry because I never saw those eyes again. That day, that was a Thursday, a little over a week ago. And by Monday, he wasn't opening his eyes anymore. And I was scared. And the nurses and the doctors and everyone could see how the fear had overtaken me. Right? The pain that he knew he was in and the struggle he was in, I internalized. And what had shifted for me from this picture to the moment of his birth was that I was now doing. I was a human doing. Right? I was changing his diapers. I was holding him now. I was advocating for him with the doctors and the nurses. I was there at every transfer to make sure that the protocols were being followed and asking the right questions so that things would happen. So I was very much in my beingness doing things for my son. And when that didn't appear to be working, as a parent, I got scared. And the nurse, the doctor actually, who came around to rounds that Monday, came and said, well, what can we do for you? What can we do? And I said, well, get the ENT, the ear, nose, and throat doctors here, because we had been waiting and waiting and waiting. And she said, I got it. And I posted on Facebook this picture with some verbiage that said, I see the wholeness, I see the beauty, and I feel the despair. I am torn. And I shared that with the staff. I shared that publicly, and I shared it on the radio show the next day. But what happened was miraculous. When I was able to be, when I call excruciatingly vulnerable, to let everyone know that I was scared, that I didn't know, and I was panicked about it, the world opened up to me. And Pima Chodron said it this way, only when we can know our own darkness well can we be present for the darkness in others. Compassion becomes real when we recognized our shared humanity. So that afternoon, as I'm holding Joshua in my arms, the ENT staff comes over, and they give me a full debrief about all the surgeries and the procedures and what has to happen and how they're going to treat him. And at the end, this amazing doctor said to me, you know, we think he's doing great. We think he's doing fine. And we just need you to know that we've got it. And I could feel the terror start to fade from my body. And my nurse, who had been there, so for those of you who are nurses, you know, you work 12-hour shifts in those kind of situations. My nurse, who had been there all morning and could see the look on my face, just kept being with me and kept saying, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? And after the doctors and the nurses left, she came in and she says, I want you to know something. Because they told the doctors how scared I was that he wasn't opening his eyes. She says, see this? When he pulls his arms together like that, that means that both sides of his brain are working. That he's able to bring his arms together means he's healthy. He just needs all of his attention and all of his energy on maintaining his body temperature and breathing. That's his job right now. And you don't need to worry. Then she proceeds to tell me that she had a baby in the NICU and that she knows what it's like to go through that. And I asked, well, what happened? And she says, I lost him. She says, but that's why I do what I do. And this angel of a nurse stood with me and held my hand and let me know that my son was okay and that she had it. She had him. And that if I needed to go home and rest, that it was okay. I breathed into my vulnerability. I breathed into that, being able to be honest and real and know the truth simultaneously. And as I was about to leave, the curtain pulls back in our NICU unit, and in walks these two women and said, "Hi, we're the chaplains here at the hospital." And I said, "Come in, sit down, get a chair." And in that moment, I had this incredible conversation with a Methodist minister who described herself as spiritual but not religious. Said, "We're going to get along great." And a woman Baptist minister. And I said, "I've never met one of you before. I really want to know more." In Tennessee, in Nashville, Tennessee. And so blow out my stereotypes, right? Phew, okay, I can be wrong, and I frequently am. And we sat down, and the three of us talked, and I let them minister to me. I let them be my support system. And then they started asking me about unity and how we hold it. And I talked to them about both, that I'm holding that he is whole and perfect and complete, and the truth of his physical needs. And we walked over as they left, and we all held Joshua, who was back in his crib, and we all prayed. And we prayed affirmatively about the journey that he and I am on. He is my teacher. He is my champion. He is amazing. Amazing. So after that journey, I shared next day on the radio how to hold this. And people wrote on my Facebook page, and people called into the show, and we were able to talk about how we hold both at the same time. How do we all? I know I'm not alone. This is just an example of what we all go through. How many of you are dealing with that in someone you love who's facing a health challenge? Someone you love who isn't showing up as you know they can because of some psychological, physical, or emotional disturbance in their life. And we get to hold the truth that is painful and hard. And when we are able to say, "This is hard, I need help. I need help," the angels of the universe and those of us in this spiritual community, in this spiritual practice, are right there by our side. And they show up in Baptist ministers, and they show up in the nurse, and they show up in the love and the support that I have from you, people who know me. But it shows up from people who don't know me from Adam. The doctor, the ENT doctor, said, "When this is all over, I want to talk to you because my two roommates in Atlanta, where I went to school at Emory in Atlanta, are trying to adopt, and they want to know your journey." They're two guys, and they want to adopt. And I said, "Well, we can tell them a lot of stories." We've done it all: foster care, private adoption, and now open adoption. And it's all been part of my spiritual practice. Being steeped in prayer and meditation and in our teachings allowed me at that moment, when I needed it most, to pull from a vast wellspring. Right? It was beautiful, it was hard, it was difficult the first day. But it's not the first day that usually gets us. It's the 20th day. It's the 25th day. It's the 2 months of the same situation. And that's when we have to open up and ask for help, to be vulnerable, to be who we really are. The gift that came later in this week was that, so Brene Brown talks about wholehearted people this way, and I think it describes each and every one of you, those on you on live stream as well, and each and every one of you in this room. People who are wholehearted, she says, get real. When things get tough, when things don't go well, when there's a crisis, when there's a problem, when there's an illness, they get deliberate. They get deliberate in their thoughts and their behaviors through prayer, through meditation, and simply by setting their intentions. Those of you who have taken absolute abundance with me know it is a crucial part of what we say. Every day we get up and set our intentions. Well, when I read that again, I have to tell you that for those 3 weeks, I was not waking up setting an intention. I had let, not the love wash over me, but I had let the fear wash over me, and I was in my doing. But remembering that every day I can set an intention allows me to wake up on purpose, in living my purpose. People who are wholehearted get inspired to make new and different choices. So if that wasn't working for me, then I had to be different in the situation. And when I was able to be different in the situation changed for me. Right? That's the same with all of us. How many of you know that? That when you are able to shift how you're being with something, it has to shift. And the last thing that wholehearted people do is they get going. They take action. They don't sit there and just say, okay, well, I'm praying, so God's got this. You are the hands and the face and the voice and the feet of God. Get going. Say your prayers, do your meditation, set your intentions, and then take action. Be in the world in some way. The gift of imperfection, the gift of being able to be real and true and purposeful, allowed me to see this. This is Joshua without his feeding tube that he ripped out, and without his nasal trumpet, which they're experimenting for longer and longer periods of time that he can breathe without it. And so this is JD holding him this week, right? On Friday, I think this picture was taken. There's the beauty, the peace, the sweetness. On Wednesday, I will fly back on Tuesday night, and on Wednesday, he's going through surgery to do what's called a jaw distraction. So he will be intubated, he will be medicated and anesthetized again, and they will do a surgery to correct his jaw, to allow him to feed and allow him to breathe. It will be a process, and it will be unfolding. But if all goes as planned, and we're not in charge of that, he'll be back here in 3 to 4 weeks, right? And then we will continue the unfolding process. That's what I want to offer you, is that it is all an unfolding process of balance of our spiritual side and our human side, and it's not static. It is not black and white fixed. So I found this yin and yang symbol to know that it is constantly in motion, that it's constantly moving within us and outside of us, and that how we react to it and how we move into it really is the balance, right? We think in black and white. This isn't. God is absolute. Well, if we are divine, we are wholly part of all of that. And as we evolve, as we learn, as we grow, it does. So it's messy, so it's scary, so it's vital, so it's powerful. That is the journey I've been on, and that I am dedicated to sharing with you as powerfully, as simply, as truthfully, as wholly, Holy and Wholy, as I can. Right? This is our journey to know that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And that human experience, no matter what it feels like, is good. The pain, the fear, the heartache, the love washes over us. Let's take that to our time of meditation.